I never thought a simple favor like lending my phone would turn into one of the strangest, most unexpectedly sweet moments of my life. It all started last Thursday, normal enough day, working from my cramped little apartment in Brooklyn, just me, my laptop, and an endless stream of bad coffee. Then there was him, the guy from the coffee shop. You know the type. Tall, a little awkward, with these glasses that always slid down his nose, and an infectious laugh that made you want to hear what he would say next. His name is Matt. We've never really talked beyond the usual, "Hey, how's your coffee?" or "extra shot for you, right?" kind of exchanges. But on that afternoon, everything changed with a simple, "Hey, can I borrow your phone for a sec?" I remember looking up from my screen, surprised because he usually just grabs his order and disappears. So I handed it over without thinking much, assuming he needed to check a message or call a ride. What he did next was completely unexpected. Instead of dialing a number, he flipped the camera to video mode and started recording. He looked kind of nervous, maybe even a little embarrassed, but he spoke like it was the most important thing in the world. I was standing there, phone in hand, half confused, half curious, wondering what on earth was going on. I should probably back up a bit. This isn't some cheesy meet-cute from a rom-com. It's real life, awkward, messy, and totally unfiltered. Matt isn't some polished, perfect guy. He's a barista with dreams bigger than his cramped apartment, like me. The kind of guy who's good at hiding his nerves behind a witty comment or a quick smile. And that day, when he borrowed my phone, he wasn't just asking for a favor. He was about to do something I never saw coming. The coffee shop was bustling as usual, mid-afternoon rush. I was tucked away at my usual corner table, headphones in, trying to ignore the world. Then Matt appeared, juggling a tray of drinks and a couple of pastries, his eyes flicking over to me like he was working up the courage. He cleared his throat and asked if he could borrow my phone. I nodded, thinking maybe his own was dead or busted. But when he started recording that video message right there, I realized this was no ordinary favor. He looked straight into the camera, voice shaking just a touch, and began to speak. I wanted to look away, to hand the phone back and act like nothing weird was happening. But I couldn't. There was something raw and honest about the way he talked, and suddenly the noisy coffee shop faded into the background. Before I could say anything, he finished, gave me a quick awkward smile, and took back my phone like it was nothing. Then he disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with a phone full of a video message I still haven't fully figured out. So yeah, lending my phone to a guy at a coffee shop led to this strange, unexpected moment. And honestly, I can't stop thinking about what he said in that video, or why he left it for me. Somehow it feels like the start of something I didn't know I was ready for. But I guess that's the thing about life. You never know when a simple, "Can I borrow your phone?" will turn everything upside down. I stood there for a moment, phone still in hand, watching the crowd swallow Matt up like he'd just been some mirage. My fingers felt heavy, almost like the phone was suddenly more than just a piece of plastic. I bit my lip, debated whether to delete the video immediately, because honestly, what kind of creep holds onto a stranger's video message? But curiosity won over. I hit play. The screen lit up, and there he was, Matt, looking softer than he ever did when he was juggling espresso shots and orders. His eyes were a little wide, maybe nervous, but it was the way he spoke that got me. It wasn't like a rehearsed speech or some cheesy pickup line. It was honest, raw, like he was telling me something he'd been holding inside for a while. "Hey, so this is weird, I know," he started, his voice a little shaky. "I don't usually do things like this, but, well, I guess I wanted to say I really like talking to you, even if it's just over coffee or when you're buried in your laptop. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm kind of bad at saying stuff face to face without tripping over my words. So, yeah, here it is. If you want to, maybe we can talk more sometime. No pressure. Just, yeah." And then he ended it with this goofy half smile that made something in my chest twist in a way I wasn't prepared for. I blinked, set the phone down on the table, and ran a hand through my hair. Was this some kind of joke? Had I somehow stumbled into one of those weird moments where you catch someone confessing their feelings via video, and you're supposed to respond like it's no big deal? Because honestly, my brain was scrambling. I felt my face flush warm like I'd just been caught doing something embarrassing, except this time, it was me who'd been caught completely off guard. I looked around, half hoping to see Matt wandering back like, "Gotcha, man. You just got pranked." But no such luck. The coffee shop was buzzing with the usual noise, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of cups, chatter of customers. Everybody else was just living their normal, boring lives, oblivious to what had just happened. I debated what to do next. Delete the video, text him, or just pretend it never happened. I wasn't exactly the best at handling stuff like this. I'm more the keep your head down type, especially when it comes to feelings and messy things. But somehow, this felt different. Somehow, this felt like the start of something. I ended up sending him a quick text a few minutes later, something clumsy and awkward, like, "Hey, got your video." That was unexpected. "Want to grab a coffee sometime?" I wasn't sure if he'd even reply, but I figured I owed him at least that much. To my surprise, he texted back almost immediately. "Yeah, I'd like that." That was the start of a few days of back and forth messages, mostly fumbling around trying to find the right words, making jokes to cover up the nerves, and slowly peeling back the layers of who we really were outside of the coffee shop banter. Matt told me about his dream to open a small bakery someday, how he loved old movies, and how his dog Max was the only one who really understood his music obsession. I shared bits about my job, my terrible cooking skills, and how I was trying to figure out what I actually wanted from life. By the time Friday rolled around, we had a plan to meet up, not at the coffee shop, but at a little cafe a few blocks away. I was nervous, obviously. I spent way too long figuring out what to wear, pacing around my apartment like some kind of teenager before finally telling myself to just breathe, because this wasn't just some casual hangout anymore. It felt important. When I got there, Matt was already waiting, sitting at a corner table with that same shy, hopeful smile. He stood up when he saw me, and for a second, I forgot how to do anything but smile back. The conversation started clunky, like it always does when you're trying not to mess things up. But then, slowly, it got easier. We talked about everything and nothing. The usual first date stuff, but with this weird but comfortable honesty that made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. At some point, he reached across the table and took my hand, not in a dramatic movie way, just casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And honestly, that's when I really knew I wanted to see where this was going. Afterwards, walking home under the city lights, I kept thinking about that video message, how scary it must have been for him to record it. How brave. How, somehow, it wasn't just a video. It was a little key to something real, something I wasn't expecting but didn't want to let go of. So yeah, lending my phone wasn't just a favor anymore. It was the start of a story I'm still figuring out, one message and one coffee at a time. And honestly, I'm kind of glad it all began with a simple ask. Can I borrow your phone? After that first date, things didn't suddenly become some perfect fairy tale romance. If anything, it was a little messy at first. Two people learning how to fit into each other's worlds without tripping over their own awkwardness. But there was something there, a kind of quiet excitement that kept me thinking about Matt when I wasn't with him and made me look forward to the next time we'd see each other. A couple days later, I found myself back at the coffee shop, laptop open, trying to work but mostly just waiting to see if he'd show up during his shift. And he did, walking in like he always did. But this time, our eyes locked, and I caught that little smile again. He came over during a slow moment, and we ended up talking for way longer than either of us planned. "Hey," he said, setting down a cappuccino in front of me. "Thought you might need a refill." "Thanks," I said, grinning. "You're the best barista in Brooklyn." He laughed, that easy laugh I was suddenly addicted to. "I'm just glad you keep coming back." I felt my cheeks heat up and tried to play it cool, but honestly, I was buzzing inside. That little comment, just a throwaway line, but it meant a lot. It meant he noticed me beyond just another customer. That afternoon, we ended up sitting together after his shift, the coffee shop mostly empty, the windows glowing golden from the late afternoon sun. Somehow, the conversation turned more serious, more real. "Can I ask you something?" Matt said, fiddling with his phone case. "Sure," I said, curious. "Why did you keep the video?" "I mean, you didn't have to." I shrugged, feeling a little self-conscious. "I don't know. It was kind of brave what you did. I guess I wanted to hear it again. I don't usually get people to be that honest with me. He looked down for a moment, then back up with those genuine eyes. Yeah, me neither. I was scared you'd think I was weird. Honestly, I thought it was kind of amazing. We stared at each other for a beat, that quiet moment where everything feels like it's hanging in the balance, and then Matt reached over and squeezed my hand. It felt like a promise. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a rhythm. Mornings at the coffee shop, afternoons wandering the city, evenings texting, until one of us finally admitted we were too tired to keep going. We talked about everything. Our pasts, our fears, the little things that made us who we are. And slowly, the walls I'd built around myself started to crumble. One evening, after a long walk through the park, Matt stopped me under a street lamp and said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should stop pretending this is just hanging out." I smiled, feeling my heart race. "I've been thinking the same thing." He laughed, a little relieved, and pulled me closer. "So, wanna be my boyfriend?" That question, so simple and straightforward, hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." From then on, things felt different, not perfect. There were still awkward moments, little arguments, and the usual bumps that come with any new relationship, but it was real. It was us, and it was something I wanted to hold on to. One night, a few weeks after that, Matt knocked on my door, holding a little box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a small, homemade pastry, one of the first he'd baked for me. It wasn't perfect, kind of lopsided and crumbly, but it was delicious. And it was his way of saying, "I'm here. I want this." That's when I realized borrowing my phone was just the beginning. The video message, the awkward confession, the slow-building moments of connection, they all led to something I didn't expect but desperately wanted. Now, whenever I see Matt behind the counter, juggling orders and flashing that shy smile, I remember that day he asked to borrow my phone. And I'm grateful for every second since. Because sometimes, the smallest favors lead to the biggest changes. And sometimes, the video messages you never expect to keep end up being the ones that change your life. A few weeks into us officially being us, I started noticing little things about Matt that made me smile in ways I didn't expect. Like how he'd always hum when he was nervous, but only when he thought no one was listening. Or how he hated the cold so much that he wore these ridiculous, oversized scarves around the coffee shop, even in the summer. I don't know why, but those quirks made him feel even more real to me. Not some perfect guy from a rom-com, just a guy trying to make it through the day like everyone else. One rainy Saturday morning, I found myself wandering down to his place unannounced. I knew where he lived. The coffee shop was in his neighborhood, and he'd mentioned the street in passing. I was that guy now, the kind who just showed up, hoping to catch him before he got busy. When I knocked, he opened the door wearing a faded hoodie and a look that said, "You caught me mid-lazy morning." I grinned, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Look who's here," he said, closing the door behind me. "Coffee's on, but it's instant. Hope you're feeling fancy." I laughed and took a seat on his couch, which was basically a fortress of throw pillows and blankets. Instant's perfect. Beats my sad excuse for breakfast. We ended up talking for hours, sprawled out like we were old friends instead of new boyfriends still figuring each other out. He told me about his latest baking experiment, some kind of cinnamon rolls he'd been trying to perfect, and I told him about the ridiculous meeting I had the day before that made me want to quit my job on the spot. At one point, the power flickered and went out, plunging the apartment into semi-darkness. Matt groaned, pulling his phone out to check for updates. "Great," he muttered. "No oven, no coffee. I should probably just cry into a pillow." I laughed and reached for my own phone, but before I could do anything, Matt stopped me. "Don't. I want to try something." He pulled me toward the window, where a few candles sat on the sill, casting soft shadows across the room. Then he grabbed an old Bluetooth speaker, played some slow jazz, and pulled me close. "Dance with me?" he asked quietly. I hesitated for a second, totally out of my element, but then I laughed and let him pull me into a loose embrace. We swayed awkwardly at first, stepping on each other's feet, but it was perfect. The storm outside, the flickering candlelight, the warmth of being close to someone you care about, it all felt like something out of a story I never thought I'd be living. After a while, Matt pulled back slightly and looked at me with those wide eyes that always made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. He said, "I probably should have just told you all this in person instead of recording that stupid video." I shook my head, smiling. "That video was brave and weird and exactly who you are." He grinned, brushing a stray hair from my forehead. "Well, if it got me here, I'll take it." That night, after the storm passed and the power came back on, I walked home feeling like everything had shifted somehow. The city looked different. The same streets, the same lights, but now it felt like there was a story unfolding just for me. A few days later, Matt surprised me with tickets to a small theater showing an old black and white movie. It wasn't anything fancy, but that was the point. It was simple, real, and felt like a snapshot of who we were becoming together. Sitting next to him in that dim little theater, his hand found mine again, and I squeezed it without thinking. There was no need for words. The silence between us was comfortable, full of promise. But, of course, things weren't without their bumps. One afternoon, a miscommunication turned into a small argument. I'd been feeling overwhelmed at work, and Matt thought I was shutting him out. We said things we didn't mean, voices rising in a quiet apartment that suddenly felt too small. After a few minutes, we both just sat down, exhausted, and looked at each other. "I don't want to lose this," Matt whispered. "Me neither," I said. "I'm sorry for being distant. I'm just scared sometimes, I guess." He nodded slowly. "I get that, and I'm scared too, but maybe that's okay, as long as we don't let it push us apart." We leaned into each other then, the tension melting away with a few whispered apologies and awkward laughs. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about that first video again, how it took guts for him to put himself out there like that, and how, somehow, that small moment opened the door to something I didn't think I was ready for but desperately wanted. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe we'll have more fights, more awkward moments, more nights where we just sit on the couch and figure things out. But for now, I'm okay with that. Because sometimes, the best things come from the unexpected, the borrowed phone, the shaky video message, the guy who took a chance and said, "Hey, I like you." And if that's not a story worth telling, I don't know what is. A couple of weeks after that little argument, things between Matt and me felt quieter but deeper, like we were settling into a rhythm that was less about excitement and more about comfort. Not that it was boring, far from it, but it was the kind of connection where you could just be yourself without the need to impress or overthink every word. I guess that's what people call being comfortable, right? One evening, Matt invited me over for dinner, a real home-cooked meal, he promised. I was a little surprised, considering his previous kitchen disasters involved a smoke alarm and a pan full of something burnt beyond recognition. But I showed up anyway, hungry and curious. His apartment smelled like cinnamon and something savory, which was a good sign. When I walked in, I found him in the tiny kitchen, apron on, nervously chopping vegetables with exaggerated focus. "Hey," I said, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, startled. "Oh, hey, I didn't hear you come in," I grinned. "Try to act like you're not freaking out." He laughed nervously and shoved a stray carrot stick into his mouth. "Fine, maybe a little. But it's not every day I get to cook for my boyfriend." I moved closer, watching him work. There was something adorable about the way he concentrated, the way he'd occasionally taste something and furrow his brows like a food critic. Eventually, he admitted he wasn't sure if he was doing it right, but I told him whatever it was smelled amazing. We ate at his tiny table, sitting close enough that our elbows touched. The food was actually really good, maybe not Michelin star quality, but made with enough care to fill up all the spaces left by my usual takeout dinners. We talked about everything, from childhood memories to the music that shaped us, to the ridiculous ways we both tended to overthink even the smallest decisions. At one point, Matt reached across the table and took my hand. "I want you to know," he said softly, "that video message? It was scary to record, but I kept thinking about what might happen if I didn't say something. If I just let it slip and never told you." I squeezed his hand. "I'm glad you didn't hold back." He smiled, but there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "Sometimes I worry I'm not good enough, that I'm too awkward or too much." I shook my head with a smile. "Matt, if I wanted perfect, I wouldn't be here." I'm here because you're you, and that's more than enough. He looked at me like I'd just given him the world. You're really good at that, I laughed. You mean lying? He nudged me playfully. No, being honest. Later on, when we moved to the couch, I found myself resting my head on his shoulder, feeling this quiet peace settle over me. For once, the noise in my mind that always kept spinning slowed down, and I realized I hadn't felt this safe in a long time. A few days after that, Matt surprised me with something else. Tickets to a local art exhibit he'd been talking about for weeks. We wandered through the gallery, sharing thoughts on the paintings, laughing at the weird sculptures, and stealing glances at each other when we thought no one was looking. At one point, we ended up in front of a painting that was a chaotic swirl of colors, almost like the artist had thrown every emotion onto the canvas at once. I caught Matt staring at it, jaw tight. "What's going on?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "It reminds me of how I feel sometimes. Like everything's a mess, but there's still some kind of order if you look close enough." I nodded, understanding more than I expected. Life's like that, I guess. Messy, complicated, but worth the trouble. He smiled and took my hand again, fingers intertwining with mine. "I'm glad we're figuring it out together." That night, walking home beneath the city lights, I thought about how far we'd come since that first awkward video message. How a small moment of courage had opened the door to something I didn't even know I was ready for. But life, as it always does, decided to throw in a curveball. One afternoon, Matt called me sounding off, his voice tight, hurried. "Hey, can you come to the coffee shop?" Something happened. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my coat and rushed over, heart pounding. When I arrived, he was pacing behind the counter, face pale and eyes wide. "There was some guy," he said, voice trembling. "He was rude to a customer and then started yelling at me when I asked him to leave." I tried to stay calm, but it got ugly. I could see the stress on his face, the way his hands shook slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked, moving closer. He nodded, though I wasn't convinced. "Yeah, it shook me up. I don't want to lose my job or get in trouble. But I hate feeling scared here." I put an arm around him, pulling him close. "We'll figure this out. You're not alone." That night we sat together, talking through what happened and making plans. It was the first time I saw Matt vulnerable in a way that went beyond shyness or nerves. It was real, and it scared me how much I cared. In the days that followed, Matt seemed quieter, more guarded. I did my best to be there for him, but sometimes I felt helpless, like I couldn't fix the mess life kept throwing our way. One evening, after a long silence, he looked at me and said, "I'm scared, scared that things won't get better." I took his hands, looked him in the eyes. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. That's what matters." He smiled, a little shaky but genuine. "Thanks for being my person." And in that moment, I realized more than ever that love isn't easy or perfect. It's messy, complicated, sometimes terrifying. But it's also the thing that makes all the noise quiet down, if only for a little while. So yeah, lending my phone that day led to a video message that changed everything. But it's not just about that moment. It's about every step we take after, the good and the bad, the laughs and the tears. Because in the end, it's those moments that make a story worth telling. It was about a week after that tense episode at the coffee shop when Matt surprised me again, but this time with something I didn't expect. We'd been texting that afternoon, just the usual banter and some light flirting, when he sent me a message. "Can you come over? Have something to show you." I rolled my eyes but smiled. "Of course. What's the catch?" "No catch. Just trust me." Curiosity got the better of me. So after I wrapped up work, I grabbed my jacket and headed over to his place. When I got there, the lights were dimmed and the smell of fresh bread and something sweet filled the air. Matt was waiting by the door with that goofy grin he always had when he was proud of something. "Ready?" he asked, grabbing my hand. I nodded, a little intrigued. He led me to the kitchen, where on the counter sat a tray of cinnamon rolls. His infamous cinnamon rolls, the ones he'd been trying to perfect for months. They still looked a bit uneven, edges slightly burnt, but they smelled incredible. "I made these for you," he said, eyes shining. "Thought it was time you tasted the real deal." I couldn't help but laugh. You're insane, you know that? Maybe, he shrugged, but I wanted to do something special. For us. We sat down at his tiny kitchen table and dug in, the warm, gooey sweetness somehow making the whole world feel a little softer. Between bites, we talked about everything and nothing, the kind of easy conversation that makes you forget time exists. Later, he pulled out his phone and showed me a video he'd been working on. It was a montage of small moments, clips from the coffee shop, snapshots of our walks through the city, snippets of us laughing and teasing each other. The music was soft and nostalgic, like a highlight reel of the last couple of months we'd spent together. This is amazing. I breathed, feeling a lump rise in my throat. I wanted to capture what this feels like, Matt said quietly. Not just the good stuff, but all of it. The messy, the awkward, the unexpected. I looked at him, suddenly overwhelmed by how much he'd opened up. It wasn't just the video or the cinnamon rolls. It was everything. The way he let me in, the way he trusted me. That night, we stayed up talking until the city outside our windows quieted down. We shared stories about our pasts, our dreams, the fears we hadn't told anyone else. It was one of those rare nights where silence was comfortable and words felt like gifts. A few days later, though, reality crept back in. Work got stressful, and for the first time since we'd started dating, I found myself withdrawing. I missed a couple of our plans, canceled a dinner, and spent more time staring at my phone than actually texting back. Matt noticed. One morning, he showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding 2 coffees and that look, half amusement, half concern, that made me feel seen in a way I wasn't used to. You can run, but you can't hide, he teased, sliding a cup across the table. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to shut you out. He shook his head. I get it. Life gets messy, but you don't have to do it alone. His words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't great at sharing my stress or asking for help, but here he was, patiently waiting, reminding me that I didn't have to carry it all by myself. Over the next few weeks, we worked through that patch. I made an effort to be more present, and Matt gave me space when I needed it. It wasn't always easy, but it felt real. One chilly evening, we found ourselves sitting on a bench by the river, the city lights shimmering on the water's surface. We ate takeout and talked about what the future might hold. I don't know where this is going, Matt admitted, but I know I want you in it. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Same here. Let's figure it out together. And that felt like enough. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how something as simple as borrowing my phone led to all this. That video message, his courage to be vulnerable, it changed everything. It taught me that sometimes you just have to take the leap, even if you're scared. Because on the other side of fear, there might be something worth holding on to. We'd been together for a few months now, and it still felt a little surreal sometimes. How a random ask to borrow my phone led to all of this. Sitting across from Matt in that coffee shop where we first met, sipping drinks and sharing lazy conversation, I realized how much had shifted. Not just in my life, but in me. I looked over and caught him watching me, that familiar shy smile playing on his lips. I smiled back, feeling this warm, quiet happiness that I hadn't known was possible. It wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. It was the small, steady moments. His hand brushing mine across the table, the way he listened when I talked about my day, the way I felt safe being exactly who I was around him. There was something beautiful about building something real with someone. It wasn't always easy. There were awkward silences and moments of doubt, but those rough edges just made what we had feel honest and alive. On our way out, Matt reached for my hand, weaving our fingers together like he'd done so many times before, but this time it felt different. Confident. Sure. Hey, he said softly, thank you for that day, for the phone, the video, and for not running away. I laughed, squeezing his hand. I'm glad you didn't run either. We walked out into the crisp evening air, the city buzzing around us but somehow feeling quieter when we were together. I realized that sometimes life throws these unexpected moments at you, small chances to be vulnerable, to take a risk. And if you're lucky, those moments lead you to someone who makes the mess worth it. There's no script for this kind of thing, no perfect way to say what we feel or where it's going. But right now, right here, with Matt beside me, it feels like enough. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.